Hey everybody, Lokati here. Today we are talking about our Lightning Strike champion. We're going to go over loadouts on the POB, starting options for the character, your Lightning Strike swap if you aren't leveling with Lightning Strike. We're going to talk about early versus late game versus in-game mapping and gearing. And then we're going to go over some discussions on how projectile returning works with Lightning Strike, as well as your positioning for attacking with Lightning Strike. We're also going to talk about rune enchantments, uniques, future plans for the build, so on and so forth. We have 2 days and 14 hours and 34 minutes until we start getting to play Settlers of Calgary. And so we still have time to adjust the build and make some changes. First things first, we're going to talk about what we got here. Starting off our loadouts up here, we have an Act 1 loadout, Act 2 loadout, LS swap loadout, early, mid mapping, late mapping, and in-game. Act 1 loadouts are just skills. Your gear is going to be entirely dependent on what you can get your hands on. If you're a hardcore player, you know what to look for. If you're a softcore player, use what you can and progress however you are able to. But the biggest benefit to your character is going to be having a huge weapon or a fast weapon with a lot of elemental damage. Added cold, added lightning, added fire are the biggest benefit you can get to your leveling process. Other than that, just get armor, evasion, and life and resist. That's all you need is armor, evasion, life, and resist. As much armor, evasion, life, and resist as you can. The tree will take care of all of your other aspects of your character. On the loadouts here, once we move over to the LS swap, then we have some gearing recommendations in here. Now these are some really well rolled gears to give you an idea of what you should be looking for. May not be able to get access to all of this. So for example, this is a 382 DPS sword that has like T5 fire, lightning, and T5 attack speed and accuracy. If you can't get that exact weapon, it's fine. Work with what you can, but try to roll on a footman sword. The 60% increase in global accuracy is a tremendous benefit to you for keeping your accuracy above your life and for just generally making sure that you can hit the targets that you are fighting. On your skills over here, as you see, whenever you switch a loadout, it will swap your skills, it'll swap your configuration screen, and it'll swap your items as well as your tree. And so this is a nice quick way to see where you should be or where you should be planning to be as you progress through the game. On our early to mid mapping, this is when we're going to be seeing some of our damage increases. We're sitting about 4 million total DPS versus a single unmoving target here, with a sustained DPS on multi-targets of about 2.5 million. Now, this is where we're going to start talking about how returning projectiles works. And our good friend Paint is going to hop in here and help us. So if your character is standing right here, and your enemy is standing right here, you have a melee strike range around you of about this far, and say melee strike range of about that far. But you have a ball strike range of something that looks more like this. And so in this situation, whenever you swing your sword here, you're going to hit targets in a range of about this far. And if you miss that target, your ball strike is then going to reach out and tag that target. So when you're swinging here, if there's no target to hit, you're not going to hit anything. But your ball strike, which we get off of our tree here, for attack mastery, non-ball strike skills target one additional enemy, is going to hit this guy, as long as he is within your outer circle of the ball strike. And this is a range that you'll just have to get comfortable with while you're playing. But if your screen is this big in the game, you're looking for this to be about the ranges. Now, whenever you hit this target over here, you're going to get 1 melee hit's worth of damage. If you hit him in here, you would also get 1 melee hit's worth of damage. This only strikes additional targets that the initial strike didn't hit. But whenever you hit the guy out here, you're going to fire off projectiles. Those projectiles are going to go here, going to go here, and they're going to go here as long as you have an odd number of projectiles. If you have an even number of projectiles, then it would fire out in a pattern where it may not hit this target depending on how close he actually is to you. So you do want to make sure that you always have an odd number of projectiles whenever you are using returning projectiles. Now, as you can see, we hit this target right here with the first projectile and the first melee hit. Now, whenever the melee hit hits him, he is also then going to fire out an additional set of projectiles. I want to go like that. Green, done. Yellow. He's going to fire off a set of projectiles. Now, because these projectiles originated from his box, it's not going to do any damage to him. So these projectiles will just hit other targets out there. But because we are using returning projectiles, this projectile is going to come back. And this projectile is going to come back. This projectile is going to come back. This other projectile is going to come back that came from this target here. And all of these projectiles are going to hit him. Now, because 3 of these projectiles originated from the same attack, only one of them is going to account for damage. But this one is going to hit him because it originated from you. And this one is going to hit him because it originated from the original one here. So what this ends up being is a total of 1 projectile from your melee hit, 1 melee hit from hitting the boss, and then 2 more returning projectiles hitting him. So you have a grand total of 3 returning projectiles hitting him, as well as the melee hit. Now, we have also snipers marked this target. Whenever you hit a target that has snipers mark, it is going to chunk projectiles off of him. And so then you'll have 2 more projectiles that go off, and maybe there's a target over here. So they're going to fire off in this direction. So it's going to fire projectiles off over here. These projectiles are also going to return to the target. So now we have more returning projectiles, and we'll go ahead and we'll erase these because we're only returning on the projectiles. So this a little bit more easy to understand. So we have the same colors. So like I said, this projectile is going to return. One of these 3 is going to return to the boss. One of these green ones is going to return to the boss. And then you're going to have some additional projectiles. Paint is not my best. And then you're going to have some additional projectiles that shoot off because of the sniper's mark. And then one of those projectiles is also going to return here. And so now we have hit him with 1 projectile from our lightning strike, 1 returning projectile from the melee hit on him, 1 returning projectile from the lightning strike that we initiated out here, 1 melee hit here, 1 returning projectile over here, for a grand total of 1 melee hit and 4 projectiles, 3 of which return, 1 from sniper's mark, 1 from the melee hit originating on him, and 1 from the attack that you execute. And so that is how we are getting numbers like 4 lightning strike projectiles here and 1 lightning strike melee here. Now, also, we have these Vol lightning orbs. And so whenever we use Vol lightning, we drop some little orbies on the ground here. Those little orbies do damage. They also fire out projectiles. Whenever these objects fire out projectiles, they're going to shoot projectiles out towards the target. Right here. And then this guy is going to come over here and he's also going to shoot a projectile towards the target. Now that is 1 hit from each Vol lightning orb projectile. Those projectiles are going to travel through the target and return, and each one of those is going to hit. Each one of those also procs Sniper's Mark. So Sniper's Mark is going to create 2 projectiles that go out. Each of those is going to return. So that's how we get 3 hits from the Vol lightning strikes. That is 1 hit from the original strike, 1 return, and then 1 Sniper's Mark projectile return. So we're getting 4 from lightning strike, 3 from each of our Vol lightning strikes, and it ends up being just a ton of projectiles on the board. But you have to understand that each instance of the creation of a projectile can only result in 1 hit on the attack and then 1 hit on the return. So we'll be returning a ton of projectiles, but only 1 from each set. You've got 1 return from your attack, 1 return from your Vol strike attack, 1 return from your Vol lightning, another return from your Vol lightning, and then 1 return from Sniper's Mark originating on each of those targets as well. So this all gets a little complicated, but this is why we have these numbers right here listed in our projectile attacks so that we can try to get an estimate about how much damage we're actually doing, especially on a single target. When we talk about multi-targets, there's just prods flying everywhere and everything's dying, and that's one of the best parts about Lightning Strike is the phenomenal clear speed. Now, going back to this diagram once again, if you are fighting a target and he is standing over here, you're not going to hit him with this fall strike. If you do not hit him with the extra strike for non-ball strike skills, then you're not going to get a lot of the return on investment. You're going to miss the melee hit, you're going to miss the return on the ball strike hit, and you're going to miss the return on the sniper's mark. So you do want to make sure that you're always fighting these targets in a range around you that is outside of your melee range, but it's inside of your non-vol extra strike range. Now, that pretty much covers everything on how you're positioning and how returning projectiles work. We've also got some late game mapping here. This is where we start getting into some significantly better gear. This is, for example, a 1200 DPS sword. We've got some in-game mapping gear. If you're just really, really lucky or you get really good rolls, this is like a 1700 DPS sword. And so you can see the DPS just continues to scale very strongly with very minimal changes to your gear. And then as we are getting deeper into the league and we've seen what kind of rune enchantments we can use, then we can look at things like removing returning projectiles from our link, maybe adding it as a weapon enchant, picking up 34% more damage from an actual 6th link on our weapon. We can also look at possibly some other rune enchantments that may be better than replacing returning projectiles off of our weapon. We probably don't want to use a Nimbus. A Nimbus is going to make your projectiles fire out in random directions, which makes it much more difficult for the returning projectiles to strike the targets properly. And again, we want to make sure that we're trying to keep our proj at an odd number when it is a low number of projectiles. If you have 8 projectiles or 10 projectiles, at that point it doesn't matter if it's odd or even. There's so many of them that the cone is very tightly packed. But when you're looking at between 3 or 4, you'd rather have 3 than 4. You'd rather have 5 than 4. You'd rather have 5 than 6, because we want to make sure that our main projectile is straight line back and forth on the target that we're hitting, so we can maximize the number of those returns that hit. Now again, this is an estimate of our damage. Some of those return projectiles are not going to hit targets, especially fast-moving targets. But large stationary bosses or targets that you're in melee with and you're not moving away from, you're going to be guaranteed to get those return hits, and they're all going to do a ton of damage on the target itself. Now, for in-game progression, obviously there are a ton of unique items that are a benefit to us. Anything that gives us extra frenzy charges, like Alesha's or Dark Ray Vectors or rings with maximum frenzy charges, all of that stuff is tremendous scaling for us. And we are going to start looking at those things as we start progressing through the game. But we aren't sure what that's going to look like yet. And we can just sit here and throw like 400, 500 divine worth of gear in this, slam the POB numbers up really high. But we're going to wait and see what the market looks like, what the builds look like, what the enchantments look like, what the accessibility looks like, what the changes that want drop is going to do to the game, before we start predicting unachievable gear on the character and getting you real life reasonable progression on the characters. Get a real good feel as it progresses through the league. Now, if you have any questions, as always, come by Twitch, ask me, drop a comment down below. If you got some criticism, criticize me. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, some of it I really don't care. You aren't going to hurt my feelings. We are all kind of working through this with just a tremendous amount of changes coming with this patch and a complete rework of the game. And it may be that we don't even care what our character does, and we just sit in town and play boat craft and run slave labor all day, because that's the best return on our investment. So we will see how it goes. But thank you very much for watching the video, and y'all have a wonderful